Got it. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. We'll be prompt because we just have an hour together for this month's monthly community meeting. And like I said, I can't believe it's the end of the year, but we're really excited for this conversation because I think many people were perplexed, disappointed, sad about Prop 30, which, Climate Health Now, among many other awesome groups, was really trying to support. And we have some experts with us who can help us try to, understand why it didn't pass and what to learn from it. So if you want, as we're all coming in, if you want to, put your name in the chat and maybe your favorite December celebration. It's a time for lots of different celebrations, so we'd love to see that. The next slide. Great. So the overview for today, we'll do a welcome of any new members we might have. Really, the focus today will be our 3 panelists, and we'll talk about Prop 30. And then we'll really briefly just mention the hub teams and resource teams that CHN is building, and if you want to get involved if you haven't already. And then we'll close out by 1:30. That's the plan. Next slide. Oh, Cindy, your daughter coming home. I love it. Great. And then thank you to Margie, if you can take attendance. Brenda is helping keep time today. And Amanda is screen sharing. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So if we have any members for which this is your first community meeting, we would love for you to come off mute, say your name, what your practice or specialty or day job is, and where you live and work, so we can get to start to know you. So maybe, Jessie, is this your first community meeting?
Hi, I think so.
Cool.
Sorry for my appearance. Hi everyone. I'm Jess. I'm a family medicine and urgent care physician and live in Sausalito. Currently work in public health, mostly in urgent care on the side, and happy to be here with everyone.
Great. We're glad to have you. And then maybe, let's see, who else is this? Gordon, have you been to a monthly meeting before?
Not sure.
Well,
I did one meeting, but I don't remember how that meeting was classified.
Sure. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gordon Garcia. I'm an allergist in Sacramento with Permanente, and a new member to the group.
We're glad you're here, fellow Permanente doc. Let's see, maybe Rob Norgren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Sorry, I joined a few minutes late. My name's Rob Nordgren. I'm a pediatrician by background, have a background in public health as well. I work for Sutter Health. I'm a regional CEO across most of the Bay Area, and live down in Portola Valley on the peninsula. And it's great to be here. I had a chance to connect with some folks over the past few weeks, and really just getting more interested in this topic and looking to learn more. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, glad you're here. How did you hear about the CHN?
I heard about you all through, is it Amy Collins?
Oh, bless her heart.
Yeah. So I connected with her, and she was just an amazing wealth of information about tons of stuff happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think she was my first connection to this group.
That's great. For anybody who doesn't know Amy Collins, so she's like the physician organizer with Healthcare Without Harm, and she's an emergency room doc in Boston. But yeah, so that's great. She was one of my early mentors too, finding my way. That's fun. Well, welcome. Did anybody not get to introduce yourself, who this is your first meeting for? Okay, great. All right, so we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Amanda. So Climate Health Now, being a community organizing group, we always like to kind of anchor in the framework of community organizing, which is, if you can push forward, Amanda, for the next image. So this is Marshall Gans, one of my idols and teachers. So the head overlaps with strategy, which is what we'll talk about today. Last month we talked about narrative. The heart in community organizing is the narrative and how we evoke the shared values with our people to get them to take action with us. But today's really the strategy side. And that's the framework for it. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so we're going to show, this is just shy of 2 minutes, but it's a video. You may have already seen it, but it's really good. And it just as kind of a way to review what Prop 30 had it passed would have done. And then the remainder of the conversation will be, what we learned from the fact that it didn't pass. So Amanda, if you can go ahead and try to push play. No audio.
Forest, sunny weather,
Can you hear
and
it?
dirty air. It has some of the worst air quality in the country. State data shows that more than 90% of Californians breathe unhealthy levels of air pollutants. To reduce air pollution and greenhouse emissions, Governor Gavin Newsom has asked the Air Resources Board to ban the sale of all new gas-powered cars by 2035. So, how will the state meet its goal and who's going to pay for it? Voters will help decide this in November. Hi, I'm Nadia Lopez. I cover the environment for Cal Matters, and this is Prop 30 explained in 1 minute. Prop 30 would impose a 1.75% income tax increase on Californians making more than $2 million per year. The tax would generate up to $4.5 billion annually. Most of the money would go toward rebates for people buying zero-emission cars and to build more charging stations. Half of that funding will go to low and middle-income residents. A quarter of the money would provide funding to hire and train firefighters. The measure is backed by environmentalists and public health groups and is funded largely by the rideshare company Lyft. State regulations require Lyft and Uber drivers by 2030 to log 90% of their miles in electric vehicles. Supporters say the tax would generate much-needed funding to support wildfire prevention and help accelerate the transition to electric cars. They say the state's top earners should foot the bill since they're the ones most able to afford it. But opponents, including the state Republican Party and Governor Newsom, say Californians don't need more tax hikes because everyone is already feeling the effects of high inflation and surging gas prices. They argue that the tax would drive many residents out of the state to benefit special interests, rideshare companies. Vote yes if you think millionaires should be taxed to help fund electric car rebates and more firefighters. Vote no if you don't. To learn about this proposition, others, visit calmatters.org.
Thank you, Amanda. Oh, heartbreak, isn't it? So that's what I would have done. And we're here to learn, what there is to learn from it. So to introduce our panelists, we have 3 panelists. We're really grateful for you all joining and sharing your perspective and expertise. So Kevin Hamilton is a registered respiratory therapist and asthma clinical specialist. He's focused on reducing environmental health impacts and the burden of chronic respiratory disease. He's a well-known advocate for social and environmental justice and serves on numerous boards and committees associated with grassroots community capacity building, as well as local, state, and regional policy development. And he's a co-founder of the Central California Asthma Collaborative in Fresno. And then Deborah, I worked really closely with during the campaign, and she coached me and mentored in really awesome ways. And so Deborah is the vice president of communications at a company called 50+1, which is a campaign group. So she's a savvy communications executive and award-winning storyteller with an extensive background in strategic communications, media relations, broadcast, print, and digital. She has a track record leading teams to deliver excellent results in complex, high-stakes projects like this one in political, corporate, and nonprofit sectors. So thank you, Deborah. And then Bill Magavern joins us from the Coalition for Clean Air. He's the policy director there. He joined the Coalition for Clean Air 10 years ago and came really highly recommended to us from Linda Rudolph. I think that's how we made the connection. So he has more than 25 years advocating for environmental and public interest causes. He's authored numerous reports and articles on energy and environmental issues, testifies frequently before the state legislature, Air Resource Board, and other agencies. So we're really excited to have you all here. We think very, very highly of each of you. And so we'll just have 2 questions. And if you could go to the next slide. So we'll start with, sorry if you go backwards, Amanda, with why it didn't pass. And so Brenda, thank you for being our timekeeper. And when the 2 minutes comes, Brenda, if you could just say time to remind everybody and help. So Deborah, if you could kick us off with your perspective of why Prop 30 didn't pass.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So thank you. First of all, I'm thrilled to be here. Prop 30 was really an historic measure, and I think the team that worked on it, including you, Ashley, and Bill, and all of our coalition members who took part in the outreach and the public communications about the measure, were really energized because it was a great, unprecedented investment in clean air and halting climate change. I think that in general, the organization of the coalition, which was this incredibly broad, diverse, rarely, I would say, broad and diverse and fairly energized coalition, was very successful. I think our earned comms, as sort of the leader of the earned comms part, you always think, oh, there's always, post-mortem things that you could do. But we got a lot of coverage in the state, hundreds of articles and hundreds of broadcast pieces. We placed 20 op-eds. And we had, from the coalition, essentially almost 100 people who were the voice of the campaign. So it was really a measure that had a lot of public communication and a lot of voices. The type of corrections that we could have done around those things, organization of the coalition, I feel, and the communications for earned media would not have gotten us there. What could have gotten us there? Obviously, the elephant in the room was Gavin Newsom's opposition. He came out with a very strong and excellent ad, really pointed. All they had was him. And all the ad basically said was, look at Governor Newsom. He doesn't like Prop 30, and he's accusing Lyft of doing it, of the sort of corporate skin, the cynical corporate scheme of doing it for their own benefit, which was pretty blatantly not true. Also, I saw the governor a couple times say that we were all going to pay the taxes for it, right? Which was also untrue. So we were big-footed by the governor. What was the one thing that we could have tried to counter with was probably, we had 2 options. One was both that would have had to have been sort of taken through, I think, not an earned media, but a paid media campaign. So we needed, in those last couple of months, a huge infusion of cash, I think, in order to mount a paid media campaign. And then the question would be, was this the paid media campaign going to take on the governor and ask publicly why the governor was opposing and trying to crush a measure that funded his own climate goals? So not clear that politically we were going to do that. A lot of our coalition has important and vital ties to the governor. And possibly it also wouldn't have helped because it could have confused the public.
Yeah.
But
we're at time for this part.
Sorry, but I do think that I think earned media could have a big infusion there could have helped us.
That's really interesting. I remember learning what that meant for anybody who has it. I put it in the chat, but earned media is, what we work hard to get, like op-eds versus paid media, where you just write a check and have a huge ad to reach lots of people. So that's really interesting. Thank you. How about we'll go to Kevin next for 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, I agree with everything you said, Deborah. That's pretty hard to disagree with. I have to admit, even I hesitated when the governor came out against it. That made it really tough for people like Bill and myself, who, again, rely on sort of the goodwill of him and his cabinet for a lot of the work that we do, and certainly the agency leads. However, we continued on. It was tough to get a read on why he was so adamant about the thing. I often wonder with him and his ego if it's just because he didn't think of it. That's just, supposition, but he and Jerry Brown share that sort of a little bit of narcissism there. Quite honestly, in talking to folks down here in the Valley, both in Fresno and down in Kern and friends up in the Stockton, Modesto area who I asked about this, simple exhaustion by the time the election came around. Probably over half the people I knew had voted by September and didn't, and a lot of them felt like, I'm just voting no on everything that's a tax. And so that sort of tax exhaustion was going on. Some crazy stuff going on TV that caused people to turn away from basically all kinds of political advertising, whether it was earned or not. I think, plunging into the middle of this stupidity between gambling in California. And I know I got to the point where I was just silencing everything that I saw that came on that was a political commercial. I didn't care who was suing it or where it came from. So I think there was that kind of exhaustion as well. I think it was a little confusing for folks. The whole sort of, once that Lyft Uber thing was thrown in there, that was going around. There were some people who were paying attention to that, who were hearing from drivers that it wasn't a good thing, that use it all the time. So they did a really good job of getting their folks motivated, the ones who were against it. So it's just sort of a confluence of all of those things, coming together at once, kind of topped off with the cherry on top with the governor coming out against it, that kind of made it really difficult. And again, as you mentioned, paid media, going out and beating on the governor was not really an option for us, quite honestly. So
that's interesting politically. Yeah. Well, thank you, Kevin.
Sure, you're welcome. Don't mean to be doom and gloom. I think in a different election, it might actually have flown, but there's way too much going on there.
Yeah. Well, we'll the next question is, what do we have to learn from it? So we'll come back to that. How about your perspective, Bill, on why it didn't pass, in addition to what Deborah and Kevin shared?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be talking with all of you, and I really appreciate what you're doing as healthcare professionals and volunteering your time for this important cause. And so in the next section, we'll be talking about where we go from here. But here, we're doing a retrospective, and you asked about December holidays, and tomorrow my wife and I are going to a Festivus event, and one of the features of Festivus is the airing of grievances. So I'm going to air my grievances, and now I'm sort of moving beyond the anger and disappointment to what we can do next. But really, I think to really reinforce what Deborah and Kevin said, the yes side, the no side, the media, the pollsters all agree that what made the difference in this campaign was Governor Newsom's opposition. And I'll tell you, I really thought that the options were he either would support or stay out of it. I never imagined that he would be so cynical as to oppose this measure that would be so good for Californians. And by the way, the Cal Matters piece is pretty good, but one major omission, it talked about electric cars. It said nothing about trucks, buses, trains, ships, all of which would have been cleaned up by this measure. And in my participation in helping to write it, we made sure that a lot of the money would go to zero emission, heavy duty equipment to replace the toxic diesel exhaust that we're currently getting, which is the biggest single source of pollution in California, and also have the infrastructure to allow that equipment to run on zero emissions. So, really what we could have done differently would have been to focus more on getting the governor to do the right thing. And that's really, I think, the only thing that would have made a difference.
When in our prep conversation yesterday, kind of just making it really explicit, if we didn't all think Governor Newsom was going to run for US president, like maybe that would have made this a different outcome, that his campaign donors who promised to help him for the US presidency election, came out really strongly saying, like, stop this. Does that seem real, like a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I underestimated, was the extent to which the ultra wealthy would be willing to get out front and oppose this. And the reason for that is the last two times that California raised the income tax at the very upper bracket, they did not come out and oppose. And we did some things to try to sort of shame them into staying quiet. But, you know, these are people who don't have much shame. Even some donors who claim to really care about climate, turns out what they really care about more is, you know, having their enormous wealth stay at very low tax rates, you know, thanks to Donald Trump, among others.
Yeah. Is there anything you can name before we go to the next question, like that was different about Prop 30 versus other ultra wealthy tax increases?
Yeah, the fact that the governor in this case was opposed, whereas, you know, the last one, it actually was Jerry Brown's initiative to increase the taxes
Right. He came
on
up
the
with it.
wealthy to balance the budget. And so I think that was one big reason why the wealthy stayed out of it. They didn't want to go against the governor, but it's a lot easier for them when they're with the governor.
Wow, that's really insightful.
And they sort of gave each other license to oppose, and the Teachers Association also gave them some license.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. This is really interesting. Let's go to the next question for everybody to weigh in on. So what can we learn from Prop 30? You know, we're all in a marathon, not a sprint, although it's also a sprinting marathon of addressing climate in time for protecting everyone we love. So next year, you know, next month actually, when you know, people are participating in thinking of climate policies and in coalitions and as a movement, what can the climate movement in California learn from Prop 30 to have successful bills this year? So we'll change our order up and we'll go back to you, Bill, for 4 minutes if you want to share the insight.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to keep in mind that, you know, a ballot measure is a very particular instrument, and we have a lot of different tools in terms of making good policy. And ballot measure is one of them that is rarely used by the environmental movement, mainly because it's so expensive. And so, you know, in this case, there was such an opportunity that we had to get fully on board. And, you know, as Deborah said, we had a really good coalition. It was a great opportunity. But in the future, I think, you know, we look more to some of the other more traditional tools of legislation and regulation, whether it be at the state level or regional or local levels. And in those, you don't have to have, you know, $30 million, right? And it's, you know, folks like those that are on this webinar can actually make a big difference by going to bodies like the Air Resources Board or your local air district, and by working your state legislators. You know, I won't really say Congress, because Congress isn't really going to do anything, particularly with the Republicans running the House, but there is a lot we can do at the state and local level. And it really, you know, it's not easy, and it always takes too long, and it can be frustrating. But if you look at the success that we have had in California, the Air Resources Board did already adopt a measure that's going to take us to all zero emission light duty, meaning cars and light trucks, that new sales by 2035 will have to be zero emission. It's working now, putting the finishing touches on a measure to require fleets to buy zero emission trucks. They've already adopted a measure requiring the manufacturers to make those zero emission trucks. They're working on a measure to clean up locomotives, which are a big source of pollution, again, diesel pollution. Next year, they're going to be updating the low carbon fuel standard. They're going to be taking further steps to address pollution from ocean going vessels, which are very major polluters. So there actually is a lot that we can do. You know, at the Energy Commission, they fund a lot of the infrastructure to support zero emission engines. You know, at the local air districts, they're in charge of regulating those big stationary sources like power plants and refineries that emit a lot of pollution. And then, you know, the Air Resources Board does most of the mobile sources. And in terms of what we did in Prop 30, which is, you know, trying to raise money for the incentives to turn over those dirty old engines into new clean engines, we need, through the annual budget process, to make that money available. And, you know, that's something we work on every year, and it's going to be more challenging this year because we're going from a surplus to a deficit. So, you know, be happy to talk more in the future and follow up with all of you on these types of campaigns.
Yeah, awesome. I didn't know we were going into a deficit. That's unfortunate. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. And then we'll go to Deborah next.
Thank you. Right. So Bill, I think, laid out what are possibly, you know, with all, we saw what the vicissitudes of a really solid, positive measure that accords with the values of Californians. We saw that it's still, even with significant backing, right, how hard it is to get a ballot measure like this passed. And so Bill's sort of pointing toward more traditional ways of getting climate sort of from all of these different all of these different angles that are working on it. All of those things are things that everybody needs to be paying attention to. All of those, I mean, this was sort of, I saw this as a sort of game changer as far as our highways and our roads and our transport went. And we didn't get that. But the other thing I want to say is that I feel like one thing we did manage to do, and you could feel this when you were texting people. So toward the end of the campaign, right, we were all like on text campaigns, and we were all doing a lot of that sort of public facing legwork just to get the vote out. And a lot of people write back on text, and some of it is like unrepeatable. And then a lot of it are people who, they've already voted for you, or they want to talk a little bit. And so what I saw that was, I thought, very hopeful is that a lot of people, right, 3 million something people in California of the voting public voted for this measure. And people, when I was texting them, they knew more or less what it was about. So there is that benefit of just having gotten this idea to millions of members of the public, dozens of elected officials. I asked myself some days recently whether I think we pushed Governor Newsom to maybe act a little faster. Did he not see the worth of this measure and its provisions and programs? Did he not see what we were talking about? I would guess that he did. So I also think the other thing is to look about and see what I think about the second life of this measure, like where it will come up. At some point, we're going to have to do something in order to fund the transition of all of these modes of transport to something greener. And that's what we want to look out for and then really aggressively support. And I'm hoping that we were able to sort of just elevate that, at the very least, elevate that for millions of people.
Yeah.
California.
No, that's such an interesting point too, because we heard that a lot with the Build Back Better and then the Investment or Inflation Reduction Act. It was like the energy was there, it just came out in a different bill. That's interesting. All right. Well, thank you, Deborah. And then Kevin, we'd love if you could finish us out with your thoughts on what we can and should learn.
Sure, I won't repeat Bill's very sage advice there. It always stands to reason that we will accomplish more through steady work in the local regulatory environment. By local, I mean California and the legislature, than we're likely to through the balloting process. I think that approach is always a blunt instrument, and it really relies on a lot of things coming together. So the advice I would give, and the things that I've seen do the best, are the simplest. And this was not the easiest to understand. So you had the firefighter piece, which was meant to be sort of a carrot, and valid. Certainly, that effort needs more funding. It's hard to trace where all that funding comes from. I worked on that for a while, and it's coming from a lot of different directions. They don't actually run out of money, but it certainly made sense in a way. I think it was a bit confusing to folks. Again, tying it back to a donor like the rideshare folks, again, makes it, people are definitely more worried about diesel truck emissions, as Bill points out. Heavy duty mobile sources are probably the most common thing that we hear when we're working with communities, and we're doing, my staff is doing direct work with small communities on AB 617 up and down the valley now, and we're actually working in 17 different communities. And the first or second thing that comes up in every single community steering committee right off the bat is diesel trucks. So, if you want to reach the everyday folks on the street, focusing on that, making sure that it's highlighted, that, and the economy side, the fact that this is not going to hurt the economy. In fact, it's going to help, especially the local economy, by funding replacement for these vehicles. There's a lot of people out there in that industry that are not owning big fleets of, I think there's a misconception that every time you see a truck, whoever has it owns 100 of them. It's more likely that every time you see a truck, that's the only truck that guy owns, or maybe there's 2 or 3. So that group also has lots of friends and neighbors, and there's a lot of fear in that community about this. So again, offering up that kind of messaging that's specific to certain groups who would normally oppose this, but if they can see the benefit, could be the game changer in this situation. So I think, if you were to go back at this again, I quite honestly would strip out the firefighter piece. I would never mention rideshare at all, and keep it focused directly on what we're talking about, which is, getting these diesel and gasoline engines out of our lives, and cleaning up our air in our communities, and improving the health of those folks in those communities, and economy at the same time. I think that's very simple, and people can understand that. I'm not even going to use 4 minutes. I mean, reading the tea leaves on what's going to go on with the budget next year. I was reading the LAO's report. It came out, I think, a week ago or something, Bill, maybe 2 weeks. I've seen LAO reports doom and gloom, and then suddenly we've got revenue didn't expect. In fact, 2021, 22 was not all that supposed to be all that great, and it ended up being a banner year. So I'm not quite ready to fold my tent and go home on that one yet. But
Good.
And just, I have no problem with going this route, but it kind of always has been the last thing I do when everything else doesn't work, just so you know.
What does LAO stand for, Kevin?
The Legislative Analyst Office.
Thank you. Who predicts a deficit or?
They're great predictors, great readers of tea leaves, and actually don't have full information yet on the revenue picture in California, because everybody hasn't done their taxes. So, until they get a better read on that early tax revenue there in the spring, they won't actually know, have hard numbers. And they preface their report with that every time they do a projection, by the way.
Yeah.
But they're,
thank you.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm not disrespecting them.
Yeah. I can resonate so much with your comment, Kevin, about just the simplest things do best. Because I had, like many people, I'm sure, I had so many conversations with really intelligent people who were still confused about the measure. And it just, I think Jesse put in the chat about the problem with props is they're often convoluted and confusing, and people like just shut down. So
it takes more than a page to explain it. It's probably not going to go. It just isn't.
Totally. So we're going to go to our Q&A, and I see Brenda's question. We'll start with that. But if anybody else wants to add your questions to the chat, we'd love to, engage with the questions you have, because I'm sure there's others who have it. So Brenda's question is, why did the teachers union weigh in on this against it when it had nothing to do with education? Who would like to take that?
I can take that. So the Teachers Association has a standing position that's basically, if you're going to increase taxes, then almost half of that needs to go for education. And so, they took the position opposing, and then we heard that they weren't really going to do much with it, but they ended up putting in something like $2.5 billion to oppose. And again, we think that probably was, they were being egged on by Newsom to do that. And I guess a charitable way to look at their position is, it's a principle that they want to make sure that education gets funded. A more cynical way to look at it is they operate sort of like a protection racket. Hey, we need to get a piece of the action, or something bad might happen to your ballot measure. And I really think that their position was not good for our school children, because it's tough for kids to learn if their home or their school is threatened by fire, or they're having trouble breathing. They can't go to school because they have asthma. They can't go outside and play because the air pollution is so bad. None of those things are good for our kids. And I really think that, cleaning up our air and stabilizing our climate would be really good for our kids.
Yeah. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Deborah or Kevin, you want to weigh in or add to that?
I agree with what Bill says. I find the California Teachers Association, by the way, the California Nurses Association can play the same kind of role. I've worked with them on and off in various capacities over the years, and they're kind of our way or the highway, and their way has to include dollars. Not saying they don't need money or that shouldn't go that way, but there's better ways to do that. And for the teachers, I mean, you guys got Prop 98. You've got a better budget carve out than pretty much anybody's ever had in a budget in the history of California. And so much of that money has to come from local sources rather than state sources. And it's controlled by local boards. And it's a very convoluted kind of a thing. But if you've ever been to their offices, no one over there is lacking for money. So, it's a tough thing. And the fact they came out at all, everything Bill said, I mean, we spend a lot of time working with schools. We're right now putting regulatory air monitors, beta attenuation monitors in 9 schools in the San Joaquin Valley, who all want them because they want to understand what the air pollution is at their school when they send their kids outside, so they know whether they should send their kids outside. That makes me so angry that I even have to do that. I'm grateful that I have funding to do it and the technical capacity to do it, but it just pisses me off, quite honestly. And then they do something like this. Come on.
Yeah.
Get on the bus. don't ride behind it. You won't like it.
On the electric bus.
Yeah.
Let's go to Mike's question, which is, how much of Governor Newsom's opposition was due to his needing to get donations from the ultra rich for future elections?
A lot. Right? I mean, that's the shorthand, a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 possible, right? We can talk about how Governor Newsom wanted it to come from him and wanted it to be his idea. And that's a possible sort of, we could talk about armchair psychology and his own ego. But really, I think that this came down to that these people are his donors, not just for his past California races, this California race, but they're also his friends. Right. So I think that's another thing. It's not just that these are his donors. I think that this is also his milieu. And so that's what I'd like. I'm interested to hear what Bill has to say, but that's who he's around. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the voices in his ear.
Yeah, I think those are absolutely important points. And the other point, I think, is that he wants to run for president as a guy who didn't increase income taxes. I actually heard him on a podcast where he was speaking to an audience of tech people. And he was asked, why are you opposing Prop 30? And he actually said, I'm not one of those profligate Democrats. So he's going to run as, the guy he's a Democrat, and he's progressive on social issues, but he's not one of those tax and spend Democrats. So that's kind of, he's positioning himself for that to be his lane. And that goes hand in hand with getting the donations from those rich people to support that run.
Yeah. Wow. I thought so many times about, I'm sure most people will remember the French Laundry dinner, like early in COVID. And there were pictures of him and actually the CMA CEO and a bunch of other, friends for a birthday party, not wearing masks when there was a mask mandate. And he was like, tweeting, wear your mask, and then went out to dinner and nobody had one on. And to me, that just represented the opposition to everybody's point.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin spends time in Fresno with kids that have asthma. Newsom spends time at the French Laundry with wealthy lobbyists.
Yeah, there was a point at which in the campaign, I don't know, 3 months ago or something, where I had an illustration done that was Gavin Newsom and a couple of the well-known billionaires sitting around a table in the French Laundry, putting a lighter to Prop 30. And outside the window, you could see Napa or whatever, going up in flames and blah, blah, blah. And a car, a Mercedes, crushing a little EV. And again, when the decision was, we didn't use that because the decision at some point was not to go after Newsom. But that was, to me, that was the picture.
Oh, I can see it, Deborah. Damn it. We should have used that for the paid media.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
Only that no matter what, I didn't want to see the other guy get elected as governor. So I probably wouldn't have done anything to screw with that, no matter what. I mean, that's always been the choices that we've had to make around here, right? It's always the devil's bargain. So that's politics for you. But I definitely have some Democrats down here, not many left, but in the Valley that, he could be palling around with if he really feels that way about no taxes and I'm socially progressive. We're the core of the mod Dems down here. So I can take him over. You can hang out with Joaquin and a few others, Miss Caballero, and they can party on.
Yeah. Bye, Jennifer. Thanks for joining. Amanda, do you have a question you want to share?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I don't have access to the chat, so I will jump in with my hoarse voice. So you had mentioned, I don't know who did mention CMA, California Medical Association, which I know, I don't know that they didn't come out in a position, but they didn't enter into the conversation at all. And I'm just curious, I know, again, like American Academy of Pediatrics sort of took their lead from CMA, probably other health orgs did as well. Do you all have, this is perhaps a futile idea, but do you think there was any approach there that would have made a difference to trying to get groups like that to support Prop 30, or do you think it was a lost cause given presumably Newsom told them not to support it?
Yeah, every organization has its own internal dynamics, and I'm really lucky that, my board at Coalition for Clean Air, I went to them, made the case, we really should support this. They voted unanimously to support it. And of course, the Lung Association, which in my experience pretty much always does the right thing, they were an essential partner on this campaign, and a number of other health groups, including Climate Health Now. I really think that for these big associations like CMA that have got a lot of business in the Capitol, we might have had a shot, but then when Newsom came out against, that put a chilling effect on them. The same was true with some labor unions. We had some unions with us, but others were like maybe moving in that direction. And then the governor came out against it. They just don't want to be on the wrong side of, the most powerful guy in the state.
Right, like that's a really good Patriotic Millionaires, one group that had signed an op-ed for us. Tim Disney had signed it, and I was shopping it around to get it published, for instance, and suddenly he dropped. He didn't want to do it anymore. So that's where you feel, that big foot that you see coming down, right? That there starts to be fear of that sort of opposition.
Yeah, and Newsom was working this, like we had a lot of elected officials supporting, a lot of legislators, and some of them were getting calls from the governor trying to get them to back off on their support. And fortunately they didn't. Some of them were also getting calls from billionaire donors. I heard some state senators told someone very close to me that they were getting calls from their donors, trying to get them to change their position on Prop 30.
Wow. Yeah, I sent the letter, like I often do, to the lobbyist at CMA, and I listed, I don't know, there a dozen CMA policies that supporting Prop 30, and was checking back in, and basically he left CMA in the interim, but he basically said somebody from the governor's office called, and the CEO decided to step out of it. That person was at that French Laundry dinner, so it was, yeah. I think the theme is really how consequential Newsom was, and everybody, like you were saying, Kevin, that the financial implications of standing against him, just the calculation didn't land as possible for a lot of groups. So
I also think there's another thing about Gavin Newsom's own political standing, right? He was before an election and it didn't bother him. So there's something about, right, being a pretty popular governor of California, one of the most democratic states, and having pretty good approval ratings, that you feel, and correctly so, in this, that he wasn't worried about being called out.
yeah,
That was interesting to me.
yeah, I would say disappointing to me.
Yeah.
Damn it. But this has been really, really insightful. If there's one more question, we can take that if anybody wants to finish this out on the discussion. But it's been really insightful to hear each of yours perspectives, and to learn together, and we're excited to work together in the next round. Okay, so I know our panelists, if you want to drop off, if you want to come off mute and give them a round of applause, I would welcome that. But thank you to Kevin and Deborah and Bill. We really, really appreciate your time today and your work in general, and your partnership. So thank you.
Actually, before you leave, I do want to say that I want to thank Climate Health Now and your participation, which was, right, op-eds and letters to the editor and appearing at press conferences. You and Bill were among our most vocal, savvy, intelligent, eloquent voices. And I know that all of that took a lot of time and a lot of energy, and we really appreciated that. And I think that work did a lot and had a lot of impact.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, there was a lot of us in there. I know a lot of our members actually worked with the team to do op-eds and speak at press conferences too. So we appreciated the political education a lot.
Yep.
So thank you. So now we'll go to Climate Health Now, kind of specific things for the last 10 minutes. And happy holidays to you, Kevin and Deborah and Bill. So closing out on Prop 30, we just want to briefly touch on where we are in Climate Health Now with building our people power to participate really meaningfully in advocacy campaigns, next year, for instance, with the Central California Asthma Collaborative or the Coalition for Clean Air. And in order to do that, we need to organize ourselves, and that's what we're doing. So if you could push forward, Amanda. So you've probably seen some emails, but just to highlight that right now, Margie Chen and I are having meetings and conversations with our members who are interested in being part of the leadership teams for CHN's 3 local hubs that we're building. And then Brenda Nguyen, who had to drop off, and Amanda Milstein are having meetings with CHN members who might be interested in taking a leadership role for one of our resource teams, which is CHN Speaks, which is all about, speaking to our peers and our patients and policymakers, as well as the decarbonization of healthcare resource team, which is all about, decarbonizing the 8 to 10% of greenhouse gases that come from our day jobs. So these teams are being built. And if you're interested, time is of the essence to reach out to us. So if you're haven't responded to the emails for the local hub teams, but you want to, maybe just right now, well, I guess you could email Margie and I. Margie, it's pairdocs@gmail, right? Is Margie on? I think that's Margie's for the local hubs. And then if you want to learn more and maybe be a part of the leadership team for the resource teams, you could email Amanda and Brenda to learn more. So now's the time to do that. And then the forward, if you can go forward to the next slide. So this is just a really rough vision, and it's an iterative document that may change to some degree, but just so you have an idea. So if you could push forward a bunch of times, Amanda. So November's passed. We had a bunch of meetings about the teams to see who is interested. And then here we are now, unbelievably, in December. And in December, January, now we're having one-on-one meetings. So, just Margie and I and Cindy, for instance, are going to talk on Friday about the hub team and if she wants to be on a leadership role. So that's happening now, which is why it'd be great for you to reach out if you're interested. And then come February or so, our goal is that we've identified 4 team leaders for each of the 3 hubs, NorCal, Central Valley, and SoCal, and 2 leaders for each of the resource teams. And that we then start to, in March, launch those teams. So they come together, talk about how they want to work together, their norms, their purpose, all the fun stuff of launching a really effective, awesome team. And then we start working on campaigns in the spring. So maybe March or April, and more to come on that, but that's kind of where we're headed. So it's a really, really exciting time to get engaged, to try building the plane as we fly it with us, which is what CHN has always done. So, if you haven't reached out yet, please do let us know. Any questions on that? Huh? Okay, great. And then the next slide, you can go ahead and push forward, sorry. Okay, and then we always like to finish. I'll take this for you, Amanda, because her voice is hoarse. So as at work or in other meetings with colleagues, we definitely welcome new members, and our people are anybody in the health community in California. So that's from public health to nurses, doctors, midwives, therapists, PAs, anybody who is in health administrators, health students, certainly we welcome. So tell them about Climate Health Now and invite them if you want to join us. They can do that at our website, climatehealthnow.org. So just always share the word. We got to grow our people power. And then next slide. Bye, Rob. And then we've also sent some emails about how Climate Health Now has been around for just over 3 years now, and it's been all a labor of love from our members and completely volunteer, a little chaotic, doing it in between all of our day jobs. And next year, we're looking to actually have some staff so that we can be much more effective and much more sustainable. So if you are looking for a tax deduction or just feeling, like you're helping to support this work, this element of the climate movement, we would really appreciate your support. So this is our QR code. If you want to donate, we would really appreciate it. And $10 a month would be super cool. $5 a month would be super cool. Just, you know, anything. And I've said this before, but the more our members support us in this work, the less we have to adjust for the agenda of foundations. So it gives us a lot more freedom the more we are self-supported. So thank you in advance for considering. And then, Amanda, do you want to take this or no?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
do this. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry for my voice. Thank you all. This is relatively chronologic, but some of them are a little bit out. But I'll just run through them. Just a few save the dates and reminders that we wanted to share out. I don't have access to the chat, so I don't know, Ashley, if you're able to.
I can.
So Ashley and Margie mentioned that they're setting up their meetings with people interested in leadership roles. Brenda and I will have more information coming out soon about the resource teams, but definitely reach out to us if you're interested. We wanted to just call attention to the Nurses Climate Challenge that's going on that is looking to mobilize and activate, I think, 50,000 nurses across the US, pledging basically to educate each other on climate and health. So if you're a nurse or know nurses, let them know about that. The Climate Health and Equity Fellowship, that is through the Med Society Consortium, has their deadline coming up next week, December 15th. Noma, I didn't ask your permission for this, but if it's all right, Noma participated in that fellowship, and I'm going to assume, Noma, that you might be open to chatting with anyone who is interested in it, if that's okay. But let us know if you are, we can connect you. The Med Society Consortium on Climate and Health, of which CHN is the California state affiliate, is having their annual meeting in March. And then that's the 19th through the 20th. And then the 21st is a lobby day. And you can get CME credit for that as well. And the registration is open for that. And then, yeah.
And the consortium meeting in March is really well done. I couldn't think more highly of it. They have like educational parts and also like lobbying and legislative visits. So if you can pencil that in, and it gives CME too. So you know, that CME leave that's sometimes hard to schedule. And I think CNE and interprofessional, I don't know all of them, but yeah, so I would definitely think about that one if it's a possibility. Yeah. Any questions or anything about that? Okay, great. And then the last line on there was CHN's hibernation. We hope you all get a lot of rest this winter solstice coming up in 2 weeks, and we'll be offline for the last 2 weeks of the month. Thank you to winter. So yeah, we'd love to just finish up if anybody has any feedback. We definitely also always learn from feedback here. So if you have any thoughts on what went well, what could have gone better today, and then any key learnings, we would be interested. And we have a couple of minutes if people have questions or things you want to mention.
Cindy, thank you for putting that in. I would just be really curious, by a quick show of hands for those of you who are left, was that useful hearing them talk about Prop 30? Did y'all think? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We were, yeah, very okay. Cool. That's good to know.